Now come along and listen to us talk with the Bon Jam. Go and have a lovely little walk with the Bon Jam. Maybe put it on and go to bed with the Bon Jam. Or grab yourself a slice of toast and spread with the Bon Jam.
Hello and welcome to Bon Jam with me, Simon Jeffrey, and I'm joined by the dolly to my holly. It's Mr. James Turner.
Hello. One day I'm going to get really offended by one of these things that you say to me. But I'm happy with Dolly.
But it is not today. How are you doing, James?
I'm good. I'm raring to go.
Excellent.
Yeah. How are you?
Very well. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been some time.
So today's episode is Moonraker.
Woohoo!
I've been looking forward to this one. I think opinion is divided, but even my opinion has changed over the years, but it'd be interesting to see what you thought on your last rewatch. But first, before we dive into the details, James, could you do me a favour and summarise the plot for me as best you can, please?
Summarise it. We'll see what we can do, how brief this may be. But so a plane carrying a rocket goes missing. So when I say rocket, a space rocket called Moonraker. It goes missing, and Bond is tasked with finding what happened to the rocket, because when they examined the wreckage, the space rocket was not among the wreckage. So where has it gone? Bond decides to find the source of where the rocket was made, and that kind of becomes quite a bit of a theme where Bond uses investigative skills by just going to the source, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But so Bond goes to where the rocket was made, which was Drax Industries, which is led by Hugo Drax, and basically gets a little tour around the facility. Hugo Drax himself could be very innocent and play innocent and just let Bond investigate and everything would be all right. But he decides, actually, we'll try and kill him a few times whilst he's investigating, making me look really guilty in all of this. And so Bond escapes a few near-death situations quite easily. Whilst there, he finds like a receipt or some sort of business card or something like that relating to some glass that is ordered to be made. For some reason, this makes Bond curious. So this glass is made in Venice, Italy. So Bond decides to use his skills that he's used before and go and find the source of where the glass was made. He goes to Venice, Italy to see what the crack is. And once he gets there, he finds that they're making some sort of chemical weapon. When he witnesses this deadly virus kill some scientists, he then brings in MI6 and the Ministry of Defence. But when they arrive, the lab that he discovers this chemical has all but disappeared, leaving no trace. So Bond actually managed to steal some of the chemical, and he also finds a link to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. He doesn't really find much other than the fact that some planes are taking off and stuff like that. But he does find that Q has discovered that the virus is made somewhere in Brazil as well as in the Amazon. So Bond goes to the Amazon to try and find this flower in the hope that maybe Drax is also there as well. He is, and he finds out that he intends to poison the entire world, kill everybody, and repopulate the world afterwards. To do that, he's going to use his space rockets to fly into space and then launch the virus on Earth. I've missed out quite a few characters and stuff, I realised as I'm going through there, probably because it makes no difference to the plot, but that's generally the plot. So Bond goes into space to try and stop Drax.
Yes, thank you, James. Lovely and succinct as ever. Couldn't have put it better myself. So, as you touched upon, James, it is very much a detective story to begin with.
Yeah.
We open with that scene of the shuttle on top of the plane, which, as a child, I never questioned. I just assumed that's something that they do. That must be how they transport shuttles.
I know. Same.
It's only watching it now that I'm thinking, really? That's a lot of extra payload on that plane. Oh well. Did you recognise the pilot, by the way?
Is the same guy from The Spy Who Loved Me who was on the submarine? Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Just trust the RAF, sir.
Maybe it was his twin brother.
Maybe equally ill-fated. So then we're back to MI6, and M asks Moneypenny where Bond is, and he's on his last leg, which is a fun segue. I'm getting echoes already of The Spy Who Loved Me. There's similar gags and setups.
Yeah, and obviously they thought, okay, he did a parachute jump in The Spy Who Loved Me. What can we do this time in the air? I know, let's just do it without a parachute, which is a really good idea.
What amused me in this scene on the plane, and several times throughout, is just how casual Bond is in the face of threats to his life. They're both about to jump off the plane and leave him there, and he doesn't seem that fussed.
No, and it's like Roger Moore's kind of relaxed into the role. You might say too much at this point.
He's very, very at ease in this movie, isn't he? He's well and truly owned the mantle by this point, and by this point was Bond to many of the fans. They'd well and truly adjusted to him and were, by all accounts, along for the ride. You know, The Spy Who Loved Me was a huge success, and they wanted more of the same. So you can feel them trying to mimic that same tone. They've got the same director back, and that same tone of gags of, where's Bond? Well, he's with a woman, you know, and a few tropes come back again and again. Even the plot is not dissimilar to Stromberg's hide somewhere and destroy the world kind of angle.
Yeah.
Then, of course, Jaws comes back.
Yeah.
Because he was a hit last time, so why not bring him back? And that sequence at the beginning is still really impressive.
I agree.
They took like 80-something jumps in total to do that, to do a little bit at a time. And, you know, it's just the idea that the camera person is in free fall and keeping these people in frame while they do this performance. And, you know, the doubles are obvious, and
more so now when you watch it on like HD Blu-ray.
Yeah, you can see the goggles and stuff, but it doesn't really detract from the impressiveness of the stunt work for me.
No.
And, you know, it's worth noting, there were no GoPros back there. There were no sports action cameras. The camera that they had strapped to their head weighed about 7 or 8 pounds, apparently. So they had to take real care when they pulled their chute that they didn't break their neck.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Just from the whiplash.
That, but you're absolutely right, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I know what's coming in this opening sequence, so it does detract from my enjoyment of it a little bit, because, you know, I've heard a number of people involved in the films around this point, like John Glenn said a similar thing, but which was, you know, once you've done the big spectacular stunt and you've made the audience gasp, what better than to make them laugh afterwards? And that feels like their approach with every sequence in this film.
Yeah, I agree. And because I absolutely love the pre-title sequence, except for how it ends. It is a bit stupid. Jaws flapping his wings to try and survive.
Yeah.
It's
one of the first signs in this movie of what to expect. At almost every scene, there's a moment that's like, you laugh, and then you wish you hadn't laughed at it.
Yeah.
And then we enter the opening titles with another Shirley Bassey number, James. How does this one sit for you?
Third time, probably third in terms of the ranking. It's the worst, one of the worst themes, I think. It's
very laid back and a bit nondescript, not particularly memorable. It's not terrible by any means. It's, you know, because Shirley Bassey is sort of never terrible, but it's just not memorable.
No, it's not a classic.
Now that's the scene of the crash. Wreckage strewn over a large area. That's all that's left of the fuselage. We've been through it with a fine tooth comb, but there's no sign of Moonraker. Not a trace.
Are you suggesting the shuttle was hijacked in midair?
That's for you to find out, 007.
As you mentioned before about his detective spree, that's one of the things I actually really enjoy on this rewatch.
Yeah, how he investigates certain things. My issue was the fact that the way he deduces where to go next is just based on purely, let's find out where this is from.
But it feels like he's acting logically based on what information he comes across.
Yeah.
So his first stop is obviously California, because that's where he's sent to go by M. Then he seduces Corinne Dufour and finds the information about Venice in the safe
Yep.
and the glass.
Yep.
So that's obviously the next place he goes, finds that, and it's just one clue to the next, and it's a fact-finding mission. And actually, it's him doing his job and doing it pretty well. When he finds something that's a huge threat to mankind, he reports it immediately.
That's true.
And in fact, it's really just the action sequences in between and the womanizing that he does in between that kind of raise your eyebrows and make you question his methods. But it was quite nice for me to just see Bond doing his job, because I feel like it's been a while since we had a Bond film where it was just Bond doing his job.
Yeah.
Not going rogue, not disobeying orders, just doing the job, getting it done.
Yeah, and like you say, he does do that well, but then again, you do, like you say, you question his methods with the women. What do you think about the Bond ladies that in terms of their characters in the film?
Well, I think that it's just the way that Bond and Roger's performance changes whenever there's a woman nearby. It was most noticeable for me when he was infiltrating the Venice laboratory and sneaking around, and I was like, yeah, he's doing everything right here. You know, this is proper spy work.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But the moment there's a woman around, he's just like, my priorities have just changed. And it's not as bad as I remember it. I know that, you know, when he first meets Manuela, it is just a little bit like, well, we've got some time to spare. Why don't we undress? But at least with Corinne Dufour, he's openly after information.
I actually prefer Corinne Dufour over Holly Goodhead.
Holly didn't fare too well on my recent viewing,
No.
I have to say. My wife and I were watching it, and we remarked several times, like, wow, she almost cares. She almost was emotional about that. It was just the lack of energy in her performance. She's very sultry and very beautiful, but you feel like at certain times she really should be caring more about what's going on.
Yeah.
She's just like when she's near the end flying the shuttle and she's saying, you know, it'll kill millions, I suppose. And that would be a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
The wings are beginning to glow.
Oh, well.
We're about to die in the cold vacuum of space. Hang on, James. Don't fall.
I thought I'd agree to me.
It's all a little bit one note.
Yeah.
She wouldn't quite make it into the ranks of our worst Bond girls from the last episode for me. She doesn't grate on me like that, and I've always had a soft spot for this film, really, but I'm not quite sure why I've got a soft spot for her or for it. As a collective bunch of Bond women, they're not the most memorable bunch, but they're not the worst.
Yeah, and Corinne obviously dies in a really horrible way as well, and she's brutally mauled to death by dogs. And then Bond doesn't really hear anything about her. Bond's just like, presumes she's still alive. Maybe to this day, Bond's like, oh, I wonder what Corinne's doing these
Bond
days.
never seems to care about much that's going on. Like, he's so sure of himself at various points in the movie. So he's met Drax, he's seduced his assistant and stolen information from him, and then he meets him out to do a bit of shooting, and he just openly kills one of the gunmen that had his sights on Bond, and then just casually hands Drax the gun back, and he's just so certain that Drax is not going to have him killed. He's just like, anyway, bye.
See you later.
The same thing happens in Brazil later on when they almost get attacked by Jaws. And Jaws gets kind of carried away by a small gang of party makers. And then he turns his attention to make sure Manuela's okay. And they never once look over their shoulder. And they just start slowly walking off, and never once do they check that Jaws isn't running back towards them.
They just knew he was going to carry on partying
he's still
else.
like maybe 10 meters away from them, and he's just like, yes, he's not coming back.
How would Oscar Wilde have put it? To lose one aircraft may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose too seems like carelessness.
What do you think of Drax Bond? Bond, that's called Bond. What do you think of Drax Bond? What do you think of Drax, James?
Well, very similar to what you said about Holly, is that he'll deliver lines with no empathy. The only time we ever get empathy is when he tells Jaws off to say, "No, expel him."
Yeah.
Because otherwise, anything is just a very blank face throughout it. And I don't know whether I would have preferred a bit more emotion in him.
Yeah. It's an odd performance. I like the little moments where he's like drinking from his tiny little teacup and his little see that some harm comes to him remark is kind of fun.
Yeah, and a line like that is fine. I just think, sometimes if I see some emotion.
Katie and I were watching at various points last night and saying, how does he get all these people to do this for him? Like, when Bond's sort of wrestling that python and all those women are just sort of watching and smiling, she was saying, what are they getting out of this? All these people are like helping out the rocket launchers, and they're not even, half of them are not even on the ships. Why are they helping him? Do they know his plan? Is it just money? I mean, his plan is so bonkers and so insane, and yet he's playing the character like a sophisticated snob.
Yeah.
And it feels like, how does this clearly educated person not see how ludicrous his plan is? And because a lot of his performance is sort of quite subdued, I just feel like in order to have so many people follow you on this bonkers, so obviously ludicrous mission, you need to have something to convince people with. He's either paying everyone very, very well, or he's some kind of charismatic master of propaganda and the speeches,
Well, I felt it was a bit cult-ish.
Yeah, it feels that way, but you feel like he doesn't necessarily have the charisma to lead a cult.
Yeah.
Like, there are plenty of people who followed madmen because of the power of persuasion and their public speaking abilities and their control of public opinion and propaganda in history,
Yeah.
But you think of those examples from real life, and they were always sort of powerful, emotive, passionate people that could really convince people to their cause. And the closest we get is his little monologue on the space station, where he's talking about spreading their seed, and the progeny will... That I alone have made this legacy. It's like, if you want people to follow you, you've got to include them and give them credit in your achievements.
Yeah. Maybe we've just not seen it. Maybe it was off screen where he's really good at like persuading people. And
if it's off screen, James, it doesn't count.
No,
that's not how movies work. Oh, he did do that. It was just off screen. No, we can't start down that. But what I do quite like is that he sort of seems, he's just bored. It's like he's bored by regular people.
Yeah.
Almost like a Moriarty-ish nature to him. He just wants something to amuse him. And if not this space thing, then fine, whatever. But he's so desperate to have some fun with Bond. He could just have him killed, but he doesn't want to. And he's tried the centrifuge, and he's tried all this other stuff, and he thinks, what next? Should we do the sniper? Should we poison him? No, I know what we'll do. We'll do the old knife thrower in a coffin trick.
I forgot about that one.
I remember in preparation of watching the film with Katie, I said, it's a movie in which Bond goes to space, and that's not the silliest thing in the movie.
Well, you said it before I could say it, but that was perhaps my favourite section of the film, the space part.
See, I think everything up to the gondola is actually fairly grounded.
Oh, yeah.
But as far as I can tell, that gondola he gets into is just a regular gondola. It's not... I mean, it must be a Q-branch vehicle.
Yeah, it is, yeah. But
he knows the gondolier by name. He knows Franco or something.
So is he an MI6 agent then? Is that what
I don't know, because they're just walking along the canal, and then they part ways, and the gondola just happens to be there. But even if I give it the benefit of the doubt and say, yeah, that's a Q branch vehicle, it doesn't quite excuse the hovercraft part. I like the moment where it cuts the other one in half. The speedboat cuts the other one in half, and those lovers don't even notice. And you've got that prolonged shot of the guy just going down with the stick.
Yeah.
But then when it comes out of the water and it goes across the square.
Is it the double taking pigeon that ruins it for you, or the dog, or the
It's
guy
like-
from The Spiral of Me that makes an appearance again, or is it just
It
the
feels like
actual
it
hovercraft?
feels like someone said, what gag should we do? We could do like a gag of like people like staring and pointing, or maybe a dog looking confused, or maybe we could do like a double taking pigeon. No, that would be a bit much. Or maybe like a guy pouring a beer, but he's looking so he pours on someone's head.
Yeah.
Which of them do you want to do? And they just said all of them.
I mean,
Pigeon is probably the worst offender, but if we ever get round to a best and worst vehicles, I think that's probably a surefire loser. It just doesn't seem to be very practical. It's no quicker than walking at a pace once it's out of the water.
No, yeah. And where do you go from there? I mean, it's not like it's an easily manoeuvrable vehicle to get around the alleyways of Venice in.
Thing is, we both know it's rubbish, right? You know it's rubbish, I know it's rubbish, and most of the Bond community know it's rubbish, right? But do you know what I said when we were watching it?
Yeah.
I said, I miss when Bond was fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't think that scene is good, but I'd give anything for a Bond film where a waiter accidentally poured a bottle of beer on someone because they were distracted by something slightly funny that Bond was doing.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are the days. Not to this extreme, but I long for that fun.
Just
to
a
come
bit of
back.
a bit of silliness.
So once he's discovered the drug, and you know me, James, like this sort of thing is like it's torn from the pages of Agents of Destruction. So this is right up my alley. These agents discovering deadly chemicals in little glass tubes.
Yeah,
this is my kind of Bond film. He escapes via that glass museum and is attacked by Chang. Is it?
Well, yeah, he's called Chang, but everyone calls him Cha. Is that his nickname? It's like,
I'm sure Bond calls him Char at one
Cha,
point.
yeah,
right?
yeah, and so does Drax.
It's Chang, though, isn't it?
It's Chang in the credits, yeah.
Apparently, that was Michael G. Wilson's Aikido instructor.
Yeah, I only found that out as well as that's after I watched it the other day on Friday.
Which, in fairness, makes me go a little bit easier on him because I just, up until that point, I was like, this guy has like no character, no charisma. Oh, it's okay. He's a friend of the producer.
Yeah.
And as favours go, it gets quite a substantial role.
Yeah, he tries to kill Bond a few times, ultimately failing when he's in Venice. But
I'm not a huge fan of these like overly quiet fight scenes. That Spy Love Me has a couple of them as well, where it's just slowly manoeuvring around each other, waiting for the other to take a hit, and then you take your turn. It feels like turn-based combat. I like the bit where he goes to throw the glass thing and then puts it back.
Yeah.
Chang just obliterates it. I sort of forgot he was in it until I started watching it again. He's not really that memorable. He's fine. He's really there to sort of set up the upgrade to Jaws, isn't he?
Yeah.
Which I think would work better if we hadn't seen Jaws already.
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, Jaws was working for a different bad guy in the opening sequence.
Yeah, but if you imagine that like airport scene being the first reveal of Jaws, that would be a far more of a audience cheering kind of moment, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
We would be better off working together. Détente.
Agreed.
Understanding.
Possibly.
Cooperation.
Maybe.
Trust.
Out of the question.
So Bond and Holly hook up because he realizes that she's a CIA agent because she's got all the standard issue equipment, which is very gendered equipment.
Yes,
is that really
yeah.
standard issue, or is that just standard issue for ladies? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's all,
just feel it's
all
like have that.
perfume and handbags.
And I also find throughout the film where it's like, I feel like Bond has to have some sort of one-liner for everything that happens. He'll spray the perfume and he'll be like, "Oh, trifle overpowering," or something like that, and then you'll have to have another joke, and it's like,
Yeah,
it
it's really
starts-
hitting the formula at this point.
Yeah, even if the joke isn't that funny, he'll still say it.
It is going at the kind of throwing everything at the wall and hoping some of it sticks,
Yes,
isn't it?
yeah.
So that not all the gags, we've said before in some of Roger's films, a lot of the gags are kind of groaners, but they're hoping by sheer quantity they'll get some winners.
Yes, yeah.
So when we get to Rio, there's a carnival going on.
Yep. Rio.
And it reminded me of the Thunderball scene in the Bahamas, but also it kind of reminded me of like the Day of the Dead scene in Spectre.
Yeah.
And whereas that seemed like a very kind of cinematic Hollywood idea of what that festival is like, this to me almost just looked like they had hidden cameras at the real thing.
Yeah.
There was something kind of raw and unglamorous about it.
It didn't make me want to be there, I'll have to say.
It felt like the last place on earth I'd actually want to be. Just clammy and hot and crowded.
And people
And
making
sort of-
you dance when you don't want to dance, sort of thing.
And
It's
the
like,
costumes just homemade.
yeah.
You know, like the Spectre Day of the Dead thing, I've seen people commenting on it like, this is what movies think we do, with these really elaborate sculpted outfits and costumes and stuff. And I feel like it's probably closer to this, where the costumes are really shoddy and homemade. Jaws looks really creepy in that outfit.
And actually, I really like that moment where he's slowly walking down with that weird, creepy outfit on. It does bring a bit more creepiness, I suppose, to his character, which isn't the case for any other scene he's in the film.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of starting to sag in the middle, this film. And when they get to the part with the cable car, it feels like it looked great on paper. And I sort of don't blame them for trying it.
I actually looked on the extra features on the Blu-ray afterwards, because they have a storyboard sequence of that cable car scene.
Yeah.
And it does look great on paper. But the way it's put together in the film, and I feel like this is with other scenes in the film as well, is where the pace just doesn't match what it should be. Sometimes I actually think it's the lack of music sometimes in certain scenes, the lack of excitement. And
I think part of the trouble is there's just no room to maneuver. There's such a sort of tight, confined space. They're constantly sort of ducking in and out of it and trying not to fall off the side.
But you could say the same about the Golden Gate Bridge in A View to a Kill, which I actually love.
Yeah.
Where you
But
haven't
this
got
is,
that room, where
you don't get that
that's done better.
same sense of jeopardy here, I don't think.
No.
And there's one too many people up there, so they struggle to find anything for Holly to do. So they just have her kind of flop around helplessly.
Yeah.
And bless him, Richard Keel, he's got this great physical presence, but I was thinking a lot of the issues he has as Jaws could be avoided if he just moved quicker.
Yeah.
Like whenever he goes to bite someone, he just goes into slow motion. He just takes his sweet time to do anything, and he gives people plenty of time to get one up on him. But it should have been a far more gripping scene than it was.
Yeah.
And in the end, I was just distracted by the backdrop and the fact that
Falseness
you
of it.
could see the texture on the backdrop that it was being projected onto.
I've not noticed that, but yeah.
And if I'm getting distracted by that, it's probably not a good sign.
Yeah. What would you do
should-
differently?
Do it all quicker.
Yeah.
It feels like characters waiting their turn.
I mentioned it before, and I noticed it in that scene as well. Is John Barry's score,
Yeah.
and there are really nice moments in the score, especially when you see the space station later on and stuff like that. But people are going to hate me for saying this, but John Barry can do really bold, romantic, or extravagant pieces of music. Whereas if something needs pace, it's not John Barry's strength. Whereas someone like Marvin Hamlish from the last film, I feel like there would have been a bit more pace within the action.
Yeah, I always remember Moonraker's soundtrack quite fondly. When I first learned to drive, I had them all on my iPod, and I used to have one of those cassette adapters for my car that you could plug in an iPod into it. And because I'd just learned to drive, I used to love driving everywhere and driving as much as I could. And I found the Moonraker soundtrack to be one of my favourites to put on a summer day when it's the kind of Bond arrives in Rio and things like that, and the space laser battle, which are more kind of sweeping and exotic or epic than they are thrilling and action-packed, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think the action theme that he has for Moonraker is like that bomb, 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 and it just sounds a bit circus-like or comical or a bit silly and not as dramatic as it should be.
But it was nice in this to have the 007 theme back for a little bit.
Yes, yeah, and it's the...
I'm still waiting for that to come back one day.
I firmly believe one day one composer will be like, you know what, it's time. It's time.
Yeah, and we'll probably disagree with it when they do.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
They'll probably use it wrong. It's good to have John Barry back. I prefer the soundtrack to his Man with the Golden Gun soundtrack. And I also think he seems to find a new energy with Octopussy and A View to a Kill, and especially Living Daylights, I think, are some of his best.
Yes, I would agree.
So yeah. I don't think he's like past his best. I just think, like you say, maybe his action motif in this is just not the most exciting.
No. But yeah, he returns to form soon.
So, James, what happens after Jaws has crashed the cable car?
Well, Jaws is struggling to lift this massive thing off his head, and then somebody comes to the rescue who can also lift that heavy thing. I don't know, somehow. This little girl who comes along, let's say little girl, so I'll rephrase that.
Don't call her a little girl, James.
Yeah, so then this lady comes along who's much smaller than Jaws, but helps him lift this massive thing off him, and Jaws immediately falls in love as soon as he sees her.
Right, help me out.
Go on.
In your understanding, who is she?
She was just a nice lady who's gone doing a bit of touristy stuff. Gone to visit.
I never understood it as a kid who she was meant to be. When it cuts to that shot of her wading through the wreckage, it looks like she's come off stage or something, like a performer. It looks like she's in costume or one of those like Oktoberfest type barmaids or something, or or something like from The Sound of Music or something.
Yeah.
Is it your understanding that that's just a person, just holiday maker?
Just holiday maker. She just come to see the sights, and suddenly this booming cable car comes through the station, and like, oh my god, what's happened?
Because that's what the film needed, I think. That's what everyone wanted to see.
What, Jaws?
Isn't it?
What, Jaws?
Jaws. Yeah, Jaws to fall in love.
Well, it wasn't me.
The story goes apparently that they originally wanted it to be some big, equally strong Amazonian woman.
Yeah.
And it was Richard Keel himself who said that, my own wife is this height, so maybe someone like this.
Yeah.
And they obviously thought, oh, that would be good for a laugh. Okay, fine. Whatever. You've had your fun. But in the grand scheme of Drax's plan, obviously Bond calls him out on it at the end, but Drax's plan presumably was always to create a master race of perfection, of perfect physical specimens. Mm-hmm. So he probably knew maybe Jaws was going to be the exception to that. He would keep Jaws around as muscle. Mm-hmm.Maybe not breed Jaws, but...
maybe Drax didn't know he was in a relationship with this other...
Right,
girl. But then...
Why is she there? Why is she in space?
Because...
How did that conversation go?
So we're going to go back to something that happened off screen here.
Right,
so
okay. Obviously it happened off screen because we don't see it.
So Jaws has said to her, like, listen, I've got this job at the moment. I'm going to have to go to space, and once it's over, then we can get back home and we can go on holiday or something together and do something nice. But you only just come up to space with me just for a couple of days, and we'll come back down and we'll do what you want.
So do you think Jaws is quite chatty when he's not on camera?
Well, yeah, the only time we see him talk is to her. So, yeah, I can only presume that. And she's like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. Trip to space, that'll be all right.
But do you think that, I mean, there must have been a scene then where he turned up back at Drax's headquarters with this girl in tow, and Drax is like, Jaws, glad you're... Who's that? And you think he was like, well, this is my girlfriend.
Or maybe Jaws is good friends with someone in HR and is just like, can you just put this sex person on the list?
Do you think he said, well, you did give me a +1. Well, I didn't expect you to use it, Jaws. That was just a formality.
Yeah, that
she's coming or I'm not coming. Oh, fine. Bring her along then. And then they do that thing they did in Spy Love Me a couple of times where they play the music from something else just because Bond's on a horse for a bit.
Oh,
so
yeah.
They put in
A bit of Magnificent Seven in.
Yeah. So you see a few fun cue gags, and this is when they show you the laser for the first time, just so you're not too surprised later on.
Whoa, what's that?
I think that was just to soften the blow of the bonkers crap that we're about to see later.
We do also have another bit where Bond corrects Q and M says, oh, well done, James, which I feel also is similar to the Spy Love for me. But Q came up with the identity of the virus. He found out it's poisonous to humans, but for animals and plants it's fine. But
Bond already knows where it came from.
Well, yeah. And then does that mean the whole Rio stuff was totally pointless? I mean, there was nothing there. It didn't change the plot at all.
He's already found the chemical and given a sample to Q.
Yeah, in Venice.
Yes.
So all he does in Rio is just watch a few planes take off.
Yeah.
That's purely it. So he didn't actually need to go to Rio at all.
He knows that something's happening. He knows that Drax is moving out, and that's about it.
Yeah.
But, sometimes there's going to be cul-de-sacs and red herrings every now and then. But,
yeah, okay. Part of the investigation.
Yeah, let's go with that. So he wanders into this kind of temple thing.
Well, actually, he just so happens to find a girl walking and then follows her for like about 2 or 3 miles.
The receptionist from Venice. It's just in the jungle. And then he just quietly and slowly positions himself right on the right spot to be catapulted into the pond.
Yeah. And then he has a wrestle with a snake.
I have a hard time kind of really making excuses for this sequence. It's all just a bit saggy.
Well, again, it's just the pace again. It's just like...
Yeah.
It's almost like a dream sequence. It's like it's not even happening.
It's like a trip.
Yeah. It's like, what is all these women looking at me?
It starts to feel a bit Austin Powers-ish.
Yeah.
As Katie pointed out, when he's brought into that command center, he comes in and the door shuts very close behind him, and I half expected him to react like he'd got caught in the door, like Austin Powers does. But yeah, Drax reveals the plan, and the sets are great. I mean, it's like this weird. It's like being inside a kind of high-tech Toblerone.
That's one way to describe it. And then Bond's like, "Hang on, wait a second. Why did the spaceship go missing in the first place? You already owned it anyway." I was like, "Well, I needed it."
Yeah, I can't. Does that make sense?
No, it said, "Oh, one of the other rockets broke down or something like that."
Couldn't he just ask for it back?
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's like, well,
if it belonged to him the whole time.
Yeah. So he could have got away with this plan so easily if he didn't try and kill Bond at the chateau.
Yeah.
If he didn't steal his own space rocket, Earth would cease to exist as we know it.
I feel like if we take it as read that they decided to send Bond into space, up till this point, I'm not talking about what happens once they're in space, but if we just, whether or not you think it was ever a good idea to send Bond to space or not, we know why he did. I mean, he went into space because Star Wars happened.
Yeah.
Because at the end of The Spy Who Loved Me, it said Bond will be back in For Your Eyes Only. Mm-hmm. And they obviously changed their mind because of Star Wars. And they weren't the only people who rushed to do a space film around that same time. Paramount famously were taken by surprise at the success of Star Wars and said, well, we need to do a space film. What do we own? And someone said, well, we own Star Trek. So that's how the Star Trek movies came back. It'd been off the TV for 10 years at that point.
I didn't know that.
So it was this sort of post-Star Wars rush to go into space. And from a marketing point of view, you can say it's a little shallow, but you can understand why. They still had Moonraker presumably on their list of films to get around to doing at some point.
Yeah.
And they thought, hey, this is about rockets. Maybe we could make it about going into space. Because the book's not about going into space. It's about rockets, not space shuttles. It's about missiles.
And he was very close to going into space in You Only Live Twice.
Yeah, he almost did.
But
I think whether or not you agree whether it was the right thing to take him to space or not, it's almost convincing the manner in which he ends up in a space shuttle. If you take everything up till this point as, okay, I guess this guy's doing what he's doing. We haven't seen the space station yet. We haven't seen what that space sequence is going to look like yet. We've only seen a glimpse of a laser at this point. So we don't know how silly it's going to get. But up until this point, when Bond stumbles upon a bad guy launching rockets, it's not the most ludicrous thing that he would end up going into space at this point.
No.
I mean, what happens once he's there is still up for debate, but I don't, in theory, disagree with sending Bond to space.
I don't. I quite like the novelty of having a film where Bond does go to space. I don't want it to happen again, but the fact that it happens or has happened in this film, I'm like, yeah, cool. This is the one where he goes to space.
And I like the kind of relative realism, at the time at least, of the space shuttles and the rockets. It's not science fiction to the level of Star Wars or whatever. They try to present it as realistic, and then they approach the space station, and that's when things get a little bit outlandish, perhaps.
Yeah.
Because as they approach it, they see it for the first time. Holly says, "There's nothing on the radar scan," and she repeats, like, "There's still nothing on the radar scan. There's a whole city in space, and no one knows it's here." But it's huge. Fine, it's invisible to radar, but why can no one see it? I mean, you can see the ISS with the naked eye, and it's smaller than that. Like, anyone with a telescope would see this. It's like in near Earth orbit, and it's huge.
Well, maybe telescopes weren't as popular as they are now.
James.
Maybe it's hiding behind the moon.
But we know that's not true. We can see the moon in the shots. We know how long ago the planets were discovered, and we know when stars in other galaxies were discovered, and they were discovered a long time before Moonraker.
When was the International Space Station put up?
1998.
Okay, I was going to say maybe people actually thought it was the International Space Station, but maybe not.
There's no excusing it. You'd see it.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things you have to try and ignore.
I've never thought of it like that.
The zero-G effects are fun, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's a mixture of slow motion for the most part and a bit of wire work. At one point, there's just a guy doing a handstand in the background, which is fun.
I need to rewind it and just watch what the extras are doing.
And they kind of, obviously, they don't want to do a whole zero gravity third act because that would be probably way too costly. But so they have to try and engineer some kind of science fiction simulated gravity, and they use a sort of semi-physics based idea of this idea of rotation and centrifugal force and things like that. But it's wrong, isn't it? I mean, you don't have to be a physics professor to know that turning that station on that axis does not generate gravity, right?
I'm not a scientist, but yeah, I don't think that's how it works.
Well, the spacecraft in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is like a wheel, and it spins on its center axis. And you think, well, for the people inside that wheel, they're being forced to the outside, and that would feel like gravity, because it's like the feeling of being on a roundabout, and it's that centrifugal force that pushes you outwards. but this is spinning on the wrong axis for that to work. It's the wrong shape. Not to be too scientific about it, but it just, even as a kid, I knew something was wrong. And the fact that they can go out to certain parts of it are zero gravity and certain parts aren't, I don't think it really holds up.
I've never looked at it in that detail before, I will admit, but yeah, I'll agree with you on that.
You take my word for it.
Yep. So the way Bond gets out of being caught in the space station is that he manages to subtly make Jaws realise that he's not going to be suitable. So Jaws switches sides.
You think that's subtle, do you?
Well, without saying Jaws,
Jaws rather abruptly switches allegiance.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying he didn't go, Jaws, listen, this is a bit wrong.
I like that his girlfriend's got like matching bows on her pigtails to her spacesuit.
I don't even know.
Like, did she make them herself, or were they supplied? Like, all right, you can bring her along. Oh, and she also needs ribbons for her hair. Really? Yes, or I'm not coming. Fine. On one condition, Jaws, you obey me, all right? Deal.
Oops.
That's why he's so angry.
Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing that Jaws switches sides, generally speaking?
A bad thing.
Why do you say that? Because
I don't like him being helpful and good. I think he was genuinely scary in The Spy Who Loved Me, and I don't think he was the scariest part in this is when he's wearing that weird costume and he's walking really slowly towards her. But it was a kid that asked for it, wasn't it?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah,
a kid that says, "Thank you, we love Jaws. I wish he was a goodie." And the director said, "Okay,
you can write the script."
Do you want to write the film? I don't know why the director's talking like that. And then we get a full-on like EVA space battle outside in space.
Yeah. I think that's that's like peak craziness or peak ridiculousness.
Just a lot of zapping and zipping and zapping and zopping. I think the sound just doesn't do it any favors. It sounds like really science fictiony, like that. The zip, 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 zip,
yeah.
Pew,
Yeah.
pew, pew, pew.
Would it have been better if they just, instead of having laser guns, they just broke into the space station and then started battling?
I think there's something quite cool about the image of all those people just exiting the shuttle and floating towards the thing. But I get very little from the fight itself. I like John Barry's music.
Yeah.
As they exit, and it feels like, the cavalry's arrived. In they go. But yeah, it probably would have been more effective of them just to break in. I think the trouble with those lasers is we see them hitting people and we don't see it doing any damage. We just see people falling down, dying, and we've got no frame of reference as to what that feels like or what that does to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what being shot feels like, but I kind of know what it does to someone. I'm like, how is that killing them? What is it doing? Is it going through them? It doesn't look like it is, but maybe that's just the PG nature of the movie.
To me, that sequence is very similar to the one in Thunderball, where there's the underwater battle.
Yeah.
Now we've got an in-space battle. And sometimes I'm like, oh, what the hell's going on here? But your mind just kind of switches off for me. Well,
we don't know who any of these people are.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look like there's any less people in the space station than before all of them died.
Yeah.
So then the space station's sort of breaking apart,
Yeah.
and it's all going a bit downhill. Drax seems to have just given up.
There's a bit where Jaws' hand just suddenly reaches around the corner and grabs some guy, and then you see them fighting inside the space station. But there's no music at this point. It just cuts, and I feel like that was the moment where we should have had some it's very similar to Spy Who Loved Me. I'm thinking where the tanker battle is, but yeah, just the music stops where I think there should have been music there, and then obviously Drax then escapes down the little corridor.
Bond uses his little wrist gadget, which I quite like. It saved him earlier, and I like this. It's a sort of bespoke little standard issue thing.
I also like that he uses it more than once.
It's not necessarily obvious that he's going to use it.
So it's nice to have the gadget come into use again. But yeah, and Drax gets incapacitated by the dart and then thrown out into space.
Yeah. And then stuff happens. Jaws helps them escape.
And
And
Bond is like, it's okay. They'll live.
don't worry, they'll make it.
They'll make it, yeah. It's
Will
only
they?
100, yeah.
They're in just a bit of the station that's sheared off. Just drifting. It looks like it's drifting away from Earth as well.
Yeah.
But we later hear that they've been picked up because it's just not that kind of movie, I guess, where they would consign them to their fate. So, I guess in the Roger Moore Bond timeline, Jaws is still alive and living his happily ever after. And you can debate whether or not he deserves that or not.
Yeah.
I'm sure the families of all those victims think he should see his comeuppance.
You get Max Calber's brother or something like that saying, listen, where's my justice for my brother?
Justice for Calber. Then they destroy the globes because the globes have been released, which is quite cool. Quite a nice Bond actually saving the world kind of moment that Holly Goodhead almost looks like she cares about. Almost.
Yeah. It turns into a bit of a computer game where he's like shooting you got a little joystick.
And we have one of those sort of classic Roger Moore Bond formula endings where he's going to be interrupted while making love. I like this one. I think this is funny.
I've seen this film so many times, and I've seen that moment so many times, but I still laughed watching it when Q said, "I think he's attempting re-entry."
As far as one-liners go, that's up there, isn't it?
It's probably the most I've laughed at that line for some reason. Maybe because I'm older, I find that more funnier.
I don't mean to take it in a crass or crude direction, James, but we can assume that they are being intimate in that scene, in that moment, in zero gravity. Right?
Okay.
Just imagine how that would work.
I'm trying not to.
How clumsy and cumbersome would that be?
Yeah.
They've got nothing to sort of, push off against, or one thrust and they'll end up just crashing into the roof together. And I mean, that's not going to be romantic, is it?
I don't know about you, but did you actually look at this spaceship room that they're in?
It looks like a giant satellite or something.
Yeah,
I assume it's the cargo hold, like the empty space that the crew would have been in. It's not the cockpit, is it?
No. That's what I mean. It's like it's I don't know, some sort of sex room or something like that. I don't know. It had some sort of like a, what do you call it, hammock sort of thing in there as well, like a space hammock. And this was also Drax's personal spaceship, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it's got like a love den of some sort. I think the notion of just dropping in on someone, live streaming them to Buckingham Palace and
the White
Downing
House.
Street or whatever, and the White House, unannounced, not just saying, are you ready at your end?
Yeah.
That's just a bit invasive. Anyway, they're lucky they didn't catch them doing anything else, but Bond's like, think it may be time to go home. And Holly gives him that look. She looks like she's on something. She gives him that. She looks like Nala in The Lion King in that one scene.
Well, it's bad that I know
Can you
exactly
feel
what
the love tonight?
I know exactly what scene you're talking about.
She does those sexy come to bed eyes that lioness does. Take me around the world one more time. And then we're done.
Yeah. And we get like a little disco version of the Shirley Bassey theme.
The funky version, which I quite like.
Yeah, bit more upbeat. Yeah.
I like the ending. I as far as the Bond caught in a situation, I almost said sticky situation then. I don't like that.
Probably true though.
Yeah, it's just the whole thing doesn't bear thinking about. But we'll leave you with that thought. And that was Moonraker, James. Your thoughts? High point? Low point?
We didn't mention much about the centrifuge scene, but It's certainly one of my favourite moments in a Bond film, full stop.
You do feel like a real sense of danger, don't you?
Yeah, you're doing that. Yeah, it's perhaps the most serious part of the film. I really like the bit where he shoots the guy out of this tree, even though Hugo Drax just doesn't care, and neither does Bond.
It's one of those moments that feels like, I can't believe it took until Moonraker for him to do that in a film.
Yeah.
It just feels like such a classic Bond moment.
Yeah. And I didn't mind the space stuff as much. I think, if he's going to go to space, it might as well be now. But overall, Moonraker is just a bit too silly. And the low point for me, it is the cable car sequence. As silly as the hovercraft boat and the guy coming out of the coffin and the guy in the cigarette coffin while he sees the coffin, as stupid as that is, at least it had pace compared to the fight on the cable car, which could have been so much better. That, for me, is the low point.
It's funny you mentioned that. We were watching it yesterday. Katie said, "Oh, you'd finished that scene. You'd moved on. Why did you cut back to that spluttering old man just coughing and farting and throwing the cigarette? Like, it's just unnecessary.
Yeah.
You moved on."
What about you?
I really like the opening kind of. Not the pre-credits. I can take that or leave it, to be honest. There's some great stunt work, but the overall effect is sort of lessened by how it ends. But I like the setup of the mystery and those first few stops on his quest to get those clues. I like it when Bond follows one step logically to the next and stuff. So I like the first 40 minutes or so. I think things do get a bit silly in the gondola scene. It's hard to defend that. The knife thrower thing is just the start of a really ropey section of the movie for me.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of inclined to agree that everything from there to the cable car bit, and then Jaws and his girlfriend are kind of hard to defend if you were introducing someone anew to this movie.
Yeah, there are certainly better Bond films.
Overall, though, I still have a kind of soft spot for it. The pacing is not great. I think it could do with being quicker at various points. The action is never that thrilling, and it's always quite drawn out. But
if you compare it to, say, like The Man with the Golden Gun, which we ripped apart quite a lot in that episode, I think the difference between that and this is that there are some very good moments.
I think Roger Moore is better in this, and the plot is better than The Man with the Golden Gun, in that there is a plot.
Yeah.
So I think that keeps me interested more. The Bond woman is not as inept as Goodnight.
Nope.
This was about as silly and as outlandish as Bond got, and then it all sort of came rightfully back down to earth with his next one. So I'm glad it didn't go any further, but the occasional silly cartoonish one like this is fine by me. If I'm in the mood to watch it, then I'll have a great time with it.
Yeah.
Let's play games with James.
Games with James.
James, we have a relatively simple game for you today. It is a quiz,
Okay.
and this is called Guess the Bond Movie by the 1-star Amazon review.
Ooh, okay, right.
So I have scoured through Amazon's reviews of several of the Bond movies. There's 10 in total. And I'll read you, in some cases, a section, in other cases, the whole thing. And I've removed the occasional detail where it gave the game away a little bit. But other than that, I've left it more or less intact. So,
Great.
fairly straightforward. You just need to tell me which movie is being reviewed here.
Okay.
But before we start, James, could you give me a sound to play if and when you get one of these correct?
Okay, so if it's correct, I'm going to go, remind me to do that more often.
Excellent. And could I have your incorrect sound?
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
Mr. James.
Well, I said Mr. Drax in the film.
Yeah, you could have gone Turner, but no, you went
No,
first.
I mean Mr. James, yeah.
Are you ready?
Ready?
So, this is Guess the Bond Movie by the 1-star Amazon review. Review number 1 is from user Wondermarks. Oh, this is all caps, so maybe I should shout it. I didn't realise this was not a Sean Connery movie when I ordered it. Very boring and not up to 007 standards.
Didn't realise it was not a Sean Connery movie. Who thought it was a Sean Connery movie? I'm going to have to go with On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Remind me to do that more often.
That is correct, James. Well done. I always like to get you off the mark early on so you don't get too depressed.
Okay.
Next one is from Free Thought Tiggy. The review title is surprisingly dated. And the review is, haven't seen this since I was 10 years old when it came out. It's shocking what passed as acceptable for entertainment back then. I refer in particular to the treatment of the female characters and the way they are portrayed as weak and stupid and there to be assaulted. Disappointing.
I'm going to go with The Man with the Golden Gun. It could be quite a few of them, but I'm going to go with The Man with the Golden Gun.
Remind me to do that more often.
You are correct, James.
Yeah.
Well done. You're doing well.
Yeah.
See if we can keep it up. This could be your first clean sweep.
God,
Number 3.
Imagine the tension if I've got all of them up to the last question right. And I get the last
Let's see how long you can keep this streak going. Number 3 is from Mr. Cunningham. The review title is Not Nice to See You, Mr. Bond. And this is an excerpt from this review. And then there's the Bond girl you just want to slap. Spoiler alert, but if I were Bond, I would have given her back to the General and the villain who is about as threatening as my gran.
This is different generals in different films. It's just where you're giving him back to the General is a bit weird. So I'm going to go with Quantum of Solace.
Remind me to do that more often.
Well done, James. Yeah. Okay. This is from the user Speedy. The review is titled The Worst Bond. This is probably the worst Bond ever. I bought it to see if it was, because I thought it was. It definitely is. Brosnan is a terrible Bond. The stunts preposterous. The gadgets ludicrous. Terrible. Don't watch it. I regretted it.
I know what film it most likely should be. It's whether you've thrown in something to trick me. So I'm going to go with the obvious one. I'm going to go with Down of the Day.
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
That is incorrect,
Come on,
James.
you knew I was going to get that wrong. You knew it.
Yep, I wasn't going to keep them all easy for you. That is a review from Speedy of GoldenEye.
GoldenEye? What?
Okay, number 5. This is from user Richie, not Rich, and the review title, Strangely Insipid and Subdued. And here is the review. Too comedic, too quiet, action scenes are either too slow, as if the rehearsal shots were accidentally used in the final edit, or completely unbelievable. No chemistry between the characters, awful costumes. Need I go on?
I mean, it sounds like some things that we've just been saying in this episode. Awful costumes. Are they talking about the spacesuit? Or could they be talking about Octopussy with the clown suit? I'm going to go with Moonraker.
Remind me to do that more often.
That is correct.
Hey!
Okay, this is number 6. From Scott Robinson, the review title, Terrible Theme Song, Film's Unwatchable. Couldn't get past the abysmal title sequence with the absolute bland, dull vocals. Do they even want us to watch this film? Shame, as from the trailers it looked half decent. No way am I subjecting myself to 4 more minutes of torture again.
So, obviously, it's the theme song that's winding somebody up. I'm going to go with Down of the Day again.
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
That is not correct, James. That is Spectre.
Oh, yeah, I mean...
They were not a fan of Sam Smith.
To be honest,
And
I'd agree with them, to be honest.
They couldn't get through the song. Okay. Number 7. From username Tony Longhurst. I forgot how crappy this movie was. Not one of Sean Connery's better ones, for sure.
So Tony was quite vague in his review there. I'm going to go with Thunderball.
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
Nope.
It was Diamonds Are Forever.
That was From Russia with Love.
Oh, really?
Okay, here we go. Number 8. From Kay Williams, the review says, rubbish. A shame to the Bond name. It even started to mimic the A-Team in parts. It's a shame the Bond name has been dragged so low.
It mimicked the A-Team. What?
Apparently.
What film are they watching? I'm just thinking of a scene where they're putting a plan together or some kind. I'm just thinking maybe For Your Eyes Only, where they try and get up the mountain. I'm going to go with For Your Eyes Only.
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
That is not right, James. That was Skyfall.
Skyfall.
I
The
guess they
A-Team?
mean, you know, the episodes of the A-Team where they get like cornered in a cave somewhere and they build a tank to escape with just the scrap metal they find lying around. Maybe they were going for that kind of rigging up Bond's house with booby traps and stuff.
If it said Home Alone, I would probably go, yeah, okay, I get you.
All right, here we go. Number 9 is from Sam Wilcock. I have to read this in the way that it's written, I think. I bought all 20 James Bond films on DVD, and well, this one is the second one I watched, and well, it's very appalling. First, at all, it's all very camp, and second, Pierce Brosnan thinks he's tough. He just looks stupid, because you can see, like, the Sean Connery Bond and the Roger Moore Bond, and well, they are very suave and very comic, but have style. They deserved to carry the legacy of 007. I recommend all the other 19 James Bond films, but if you get the whole collection, then use this as a door stopper, or if only you want it separately, then I won't bother. It's not worth it, I swear.
Well, we had GoldenEye. Tomorrow, I reckon it'll be Tomorrow Never Dies, but I'm going to go with Die Another Day. I'm going to stick with it.
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
That is not right. It was License to Kill.
Okay, that's...
You know the funniest thing about that?
yeah.
2 people found it helpful. I don't know whether he was reviewing the wrong film or whether he thought Timothy Dalton was Pierce Brosnan.
I like how you read it as if it was like an 11-year-old kid who's
Yeah,
it as well.
It just had that energy about it.
Yeah.
All right, and the last one, number 10, from C.W. Anderson 316 at AOL.com. That's just their email address, so if you want to contact them, you can give them a try. The review title, Pierce Brosnan is the worst Bond by far. Don't buy this. This film lets the Bond series down. Brosnan makes Sly Stallone look like an Academy Award winner.
I'm just going to say Die Another Day until it actually is right.
Heartbroken, Mr. James.
It's not right, James. That is a review of The World Is Not Enough.
Oh, you idiot. Stupid. I will be emailing you and telling you you're absolutely wrong.
Well, that review was left on Amazon in the year 2000. So
Oh my God. I was going to say AOL.com as well.
Be in use.
Yeah.
Well, James, you started off very well.
I know, I had high hopes.
And I can inform you that by my count, you got 4 out of 10.
Well, I'm going to say that there's no way I would have gotten all of them right. You cannot say there's Pierce Brosnan one was actually a Timothy Dalton film. So
I just could not pass that one up.
I was doomed to fail. I was yeah.
I was another one that I was going to put in here, but I discovered about halfway through reading it that it was clearly a joke review. But it made me laugh. Let me just get it up. It was for the man with the golden gun, right? It was just it just made me laugh because it was like it wasn't so silly that it was immediately obvious because it was called Limp Entry into the Bond Canon. Without a doubt, the weakest entry in the Bond series since the series begun in 1958. There are many reasons to dislike the film, and I'm going to touch on a few in this review. I saw the film when it first came out. Myself and my friends all agreed we would go to the theatre dressed as Bond characters. I went as one of the 3 blind mice from Dr. No, though I was disappointed none of my friends knew who I was. My brother Anders dressed as Blofeld. None of us were expecting he would actually shave all his hair off for this, but he did. He was suspended from school thereafter and claims it was worth it. Unfortunately, Piers was not allowed into the theatre. The cinema staff claimed his blacked-out face was racist and could lead to a scuffle. He'd gone as Baron Samedi. The main problem with the film is the main bad guy. Sacramantra, played by Christopher Lee, is barely in the film. Like any true Bond villain, he's weird and socially inept. He lives on his own remote island off the coast of France, where he makes a living painting pictures of sunset and selling them illegally on the black market. His so-called golden gun is not really golden, more beige, and is clearly made from plastic. Lee looks uncomfortable in the role and was apparently forced into playing the part after Cubby Broccoli stumbled upon some private photos of Lee wearing a pair of slippers made from a rare elephant hide, which at the time of filming was illegal. Naturally, Lee refused to be blackmailed and accepted the role. Ironically, the so-called slippers turned up at auction a year later and were actually made of crocodile skin, which was far more commonly acceptable. The Bond girl is played by an unknown blonde woman so unmemorable that her name was left off the titles as the producers decided nobody would want to know who the actress was. Locations are Bond at their blandest, with most of the action taking place in Basingstoke. The title music is a screeching affair, apparently sung by Roger Moore, and then pitched up several octaves and passed off as Lulu to make it more appealing to record buyers. The script is lazy. For instance, Bond to a woman in a pool. How's the water? Woman. Why don't you come in and find out? Bond. I can't be bothered. Woman. Okay. The only saving grace is that the film benefits from Moore's trademark humour. In the moment where Bond walks into M's office and throws his hat onto the stand, he deliberately misses and the hat is seen flying out of shot and landing in a bin. There's something about that just tickled me, and I was tempted just to look up this reviewer to see his other reviews. He's called Monsieur Slinky on Amazon, and most of his reviews have that same kind of tone. So there you go. That was your score, James. You got 4 out of 10, I think. But let's just have a text-to-speech person confirm that for us, shall we?
James did indeed get 4 out of 10, as Simon so expertly counted. So once again, James fails to get full marks, despite his claims. So the only streak he's on is a losing one.
Oh. Yeah, I knew that. I knew that already. You didn't have to tell me again. Thanks.
Well played, James. The text-to-speech thing on this is always like rolling the dice every time, and sometimes I find the one that I usually use. Last time I couldn't find the one I used, so I just use a different one. It's not actually a real person. I just Google free text-to-speech and use what comes up.
Really? I thought it was a real human.
Yeah, no, it's my mother. Anyway, that was Games with James.
Games with James.
So there you have it. That was our episode on Moonraker. It was good to be back chatting with you once again, James.
Yep. Yeah.
And you can join us in our next episode. So until then, do stay tuned. Leave us a like, a comment on your preferred platform of choice. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, X, @BondJamCast. Anyway, until then,
don't forget to spread that jam.
Spread that jam, everybody, and take care.
Cheerio. When was the International Space Station put up? Are you Googling it?
I'm going to cut this part out so it makes it sound like I knew it. 1998.
Okay.